Have you ever wondered why certain men become obsessed with the unknowable? Why they are drawn to mystery, to symbols, to women who refuse to be fully understood? Some call it ego, others call it desire, but Carl Jung called it the pull of the unconscious, the dance between shadow and light. And perhaps no man, not even Jung himself, ever fully escaped it. Today, perhaps more than ever, the world asks, was Carl Jung an occultist? Did he secretly practice the forbidden arts, or did he simply understand something most men refuse to face? That the human psyche is far more mystical, far more dangerous than logic dares to admit. Jung stood at the edge of science and myth, staring into the abyss that most psychologists avoid. He believed that the human soul contains images older than memory itself. Archetypes, he called them. The mother, the lover, the shadow, the wise old man, the anima, the feminine soul hidden within every man's unconscious. And it is precisely this anima, this feminine echo inside the male psyche that drives his deepest obsessions, especially when a woman chooses silence over explanation, distance over drama, detachment over desperation. Some women understand this power intuitively. Others must suffer through heartbreak before they finally realize. It is not confrontation that unsettles a man. It is the mystery he cannot solve, the space he cannot fill, the silence he cannot interpret. Carl Jung was not afraid of the occult because he practiced rituals in secret chambers. He was afraid because he understood that the true occult lies in everyday life. The symbols we dream, the projections we cast, the unconscious games we play in love and attachment. He knew that most relationships are not built on truth, but on fantasy. And he knew that when a woman pulls back her energy, when she stops feeding a man's ego with constant reassurance, something ancient awakens in him. It is not love, at least not in the shallow sense. It is obsession. Men, Jung believed, often fall in love not with women, but with projections of their own unconscious. They are not chasing you, they are chasing the part of themselves they lost long ago. The feminine soul they exiled in childhood, the softness they buried beneath armor, the vulnerability they fear. When you walk away, when you go silent, when you become a mirror reflecting nothing back to him, that is when he starts to feel the haunt of his own shadow. And this is where the psychological meets the mystical. For Jung, this was not just theory, it was initiation. He called it individuation, the slow, painful process of facing the self without illusion. But most men run from this process. They prefer distraction over depth, conquest over connection, possession over presence. They fear the feminine mystery because it reminds them of everything they cannot control. And so they call women complicated. They say you are too much or too distant. What they really mean is this: you have stopped feeding their projections. You have become a woman they cannot label, cannot box in, cannot own. And to a man whose identity depends on dominance, that is spiritual terror. Was Carl Jung an occultist? The question is both literal and symbolic. Yes, he studied alchemy. Yes, he explored ancient symbols, mystical texts, and the hidden meanings beneath religious traditions. But his true occult practice was psychological. He understood that the human mind is a labyrinth of symbols, dreams, and forgotten wounds. And nowhere is that more evident than in the way men respond to women who refuse to play small. You, perhaps without realizing it, hold a kind of emotional magic. When you detach, when you stop chasing, when you allow silence to speak louder than words, you activate something primal, something Jung would call the confrontation with the self. Because in your silence, he no longer hears you. He hears his own thoughts, his own fears, his own inadequacy. And that echo chamber is far more haunting than any words you could have spoken. Carl Jung understood something that modern psychology often sanitizes. Love is rarely pure. Desire is laced with shadow. Obsession is often mistaken for devotion. And detachment, true, elegant, feminine detachment, is the most dangerous force a man can encounter because it threatens the very structure of his ego. Some women learn this the hard way. They over-explain. They plead. They try to manage his perception, soften their truth, become smaller so he won't leave. But the paradox is cruel. The more you try to keep him, the less he values you. The more you chase, the more he runs. Jung called this a projection complex, the moment when a man projects his mother, his first love, or his deepest insecurity onto you. He is not seeing you clearly. He is seeing fragments of himself. And yet, when you go silent, when you walk away without drama or bitterness, something shifts. He is forced to confront the question he cannot answer. Why does her absence feel louder than her presence? Why does her silence echo in the parts of me I pretend don't exist? This is the alchemy Jung spoke of, the transformation of ordinary love into psychological gold. But gold, in this sense, is not comfort. It is confrontation. A man obsessed with a woman's silence is not merely longing for her. He is wrestling with his own reflection. That is the dark side of attraction. It is not just about chemistry or compatibility. It is about projection, shadow, and the unfinished business of his unconscious mind. Most men have no idea they are doing this. They think they are chasing love, when in fact they are running from emptiness. And what of the woman? What happens when she realizes her silence is more powerful than words? She steps into what Jung called the archetype of the wise woman, the sorceress, the animus mother, the woman who does not beg for validation but embodies her own self-worth. She knows that silence is not passive. It is an active force, a magnetic withdrawal that pulls hidden truths to the surface. When you become this woman, you do not need to explain yourself to a man who cannot meet you at your depth. You do not chase. You do not convince. You allow him to sit in the mystery of your absence, to feel the discomfort of his own unmet needs, to stew in the haunting echo of what he could not control. Some will call this cruelty, but it is not. It is spiritual discipline. It is refusing to play a role that was never yours to begin with. Carl Jung warned about this dynamic in every relationship, the tendency to make the other person responsible for your soul's growth. But love is not about rescue. It is not about fixing or saving or filling voids. Love, in Jungian terms, is a mirror that reveals the self. And sometimes that reflection is too painful to bear. That is why he studied the occult. Not because he was casting spells or invoking spirits, but because he understood that the psyche itself is a kind of mystical process. Dreams, symbols, synchronicities, they are all portals into a deeper reality, the spiritual dimension of life that modern culture pretends doesn't exist. And yet, every woman who has walked away from a man knows this truth intimately. She knows that her silence creates more impact than 1,000 arguments. She knows that detachment is not about punishing him. It is about freeing herself from the role of emotional caretaker. In the silence, he is left alone, with the parts of himself he cannot soothe. The boy who is abandoned, the man who feels powerless, the shadow he denies in the daylight. And you become the echo he cannot silence. This is why emotional detachment, when done from a place of self-love rather than manipulation, is not just a dating tactic. It is a spiritual act. It forces both you and him to confront the deeper layers of human connection. Not the surface-level performance of love, but the raw, terrifying encounter with the unconscious. Some men will rise from this. They will do the work. They will meet their shadow, integrate their anima, and return as more whole, more conscious partners Others will run. They will chase distractions, seek out easier women, avoid the mirror you held up to them. But that is not your burden to carry. Your role is not to fix him, it is to honor yourself. And so, you choose silence, not as a weapon, but as a boundary, as a sacred return to your own center. The woman who can do this becomes unforgettable, not because of what she said, but because of what she refused to say. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." But fate, for many men, often arrives in the form of a woman's silence. When a woman withdraws, when she stops performing the emotional labor of the relationship, the man is no longer protected from himself. He no longer has her softness to cushion his ego, no longer has her validation to drown out his insecurities. Her silence becomes a mirror, and the reflection is sharp. It reveals the boy still trapped inside the man, the boy who equated control with love, who mistook attention for affection, who thought possession was connection. The woman who learns to walk away is not being cold, she is being conscious. She understands what Jung knew, that not every connection is meant to be saved. Some are meant to collapse under the weight of their own unconscious projections. Some relationships exist solely to teach us what we will no longer tolerate. This is not bitterness. It is individuation. Jung defined individuation as the process of becoming whole, of integrating the shadow and the ego, the masculine and feminine within the self. For a woman, this means refusing to remain trapped in the role of emotional caregiver. It means embracing solitude, even if it terrifies the men who once thought they owned her attention. The moment she stops explaining herself is the moment she becomes powerful. And for the man left in her silence, the psychological echoes begin. The first echo is confusion. He does not understand why she is no longer accessible. His ego scrambles for reasons. Perhaps she is playing games. Perhaps she is trying to hurt him. But deeper than that is the haunting awareness that he never truly saw her as she was. He saw her as a projection of his needs. The second echo is anger. How dare she walk away? How dare she deny him the comfort of her presence? This anger is not about her. It is about his own powerlessness. It is the rage of someone forced to face their own dependency. The third echo is regret. Memories play on repeat. Her laughter, her silence, the way she looked at him when she was still soft, the way she stopped looking at him when she became wise. He replays conversations in his mind, searching for the moment he lost her. But he cannot find it, because it was not one moment. It was the accumulation of many, tiny betrayals of presence, small failures of respect. The fourth echo is longing, but it is not for her. It is for the version of himself he thought he was when he was with her, the man he wanted to believe he was. Without her, he must reconcile with the fact that he has work to do. Deep work, shadow work. The fifth echo is obsession. Obsession is not love. It is the refusal to accept the consequences of one's own unconscious behavior. It is a looping of thought, a compulsive need to control the uncontrollable. But the woman is gone now. Her silence has closed the door, and the final echo is surrender. Not all men reach this stage. Some stay stuck in obsession. Some distract themselves with new women, hoping to avoid the mirror she left behind. But for the rare man who chooses to evolve, surrender is where the transformation begins. He must ask himself, who am I without her reflection? Who am I when no one is feeding my ego? Who am I when I stop chasing and start listening to my fears, my wounds, my shadow? Jung understood that the occult was not about magic spells. It was about the unseen forces that rule human behavior. The shadow is an occult force. The anima, the feminine archetype within every man, is an occult force. Silence is an occult force because it reveals what noise tries to hide. For the woman, her silence is not absence. It is presence of a higher order. It is a decision to stop dancing for a man who cannot see beyond his own projections. It is a decision to stop softening herself to be digestible. And for the man, the echoes will continue until he does the work. Until he stops blaming her for his discomfort and begins to understand that she was not the cause. She was the catalyst. Her silence was the message. The rest is up to him. Some women carry a silence so profound, it feels like a spell. Not because they intend to manipulate, but because they've finally understood what Jung spent his life teaching. The psyche will not evolve through comfort. It evolves through confrontation with the self. And nothing confronts the male ego more ruthlessly than the woman who refuses to explain her absence. A woman's silence becomes a spiritual mirror. It is not passive. It is not weakness. It is a conscious withdrawal from codependency, a rejection of the role society has assigned her to be the emotional caretaker of men's unresolved traumas. When she walks away, she does not just leave the room. She leaves the role. She stops being the projection screen for his anima. She stops performing the soft, compliant femininity that makes him feel safe but stunts his growth. Her silence forces him into the underworld of his own mind, where he must confront the shadow Jung warned about. This is why her silence haunts him. It is not just the loss of her, it is the loss of his illusion. Most men are not ready for this. They confuse attachment with love. They confuse attention with validation. They confuse control with connection. But the woman who learns to detach emotionally has pierced the veil. She sees the game for what it is, and she chooses not to play. Her silence is not a punishment. It is a boundary. It is the sacred refusal to keep feeding a dynamic that drains her spirit. It is a sign that she has reclaimed her energy, that she no longer leaks her life force into relationships that do not reciprocate her depth. Jung once said that every relationship is a crucible. It burns away the false self. It exposes the projections we cast onto one another. The problem is, most people resist the burn. They cling to their fantasies, to their need for control, but the woman who leaves without looking back has allowed the crucible to do its work. And for the man left behind, the echoes are not merely emotional, they are existential. He must now sit with the unanswered questions. Why did she stop responding? Why did she stop chasing me? Why did her silence feel like abandonment, when in truth, it was self-respect? The male psyche, especially in patriarchal cultures, is conditioned to believe that women exist to soothe, to forgive endlessly, to bend without breaking. But the empowered woman, the individuated woman, does not bend. She breaks the cycle. And so her silence becomes a portal. The man is forced to meet the parts of himself he has always avoided. The boy who was never taught how to handle rejection. The boy who believes love must feel like possession. The boy who thinks his worth is tied to a woman's attention. In this confrontation, he will either regress or evolve. Some men will spiral into resentment, convinced she is cruel. They will call her cold, aloof, manipulative. They will write stories in their minds to avoid facing the truth, that they took her energy for granted. Other men, fewer but more powerful, will transmute the pain into growth. They will begin to understand what Jung called the integration of the shadow. They will see how they projected their unmet needs onto her. They will see how they used her as a mirror for validation instead of recognizing her as a sovereign being. The process is not comfortable. It is not meant to be. Jung never promised comfort. He promised wholeness. And wholeness requires breaking apart the false self, the ego-driven persona that clings to control. For the woman, silence is an act of sacred rebellion. It is the refusal to keep explaining herself to someone who refuses to listen. It is the declaration that she is not responsible for a man's healing. And for the man, her silence is an invitation into the underworld of his own unconscious. Will he accept it? Will he descend into his own depths? Or will he run from the echoes she left behind? This is the alchemy of emotional silence. It turns longing into transformation. It turns obsession into shadow work. It turns regret into spiritual maturity. Jung understood this long before modern psychology caught up. He saw that relationships are not about possession. They are about reflection. And sometimes the most powerful reflection is the one that leaves you alone with your thoughts. The woman who knows this doesn't chase, she detaches. And in doing so, she becomes unforgettable. The echoes of her silence do not fade with time. They deepen. They root themselves in the male unconscious, in places he did not know existed before her departure. This is not merely heartbreak, it is a haunting. A psychological haunting that Carl Jung would have called an encounter with the anima in her dark form. Most men only know how to relate to the feminine when she is gentle, nurturing, available. But the empowered feminine has another face. The face of the mystic, the oracle, the silent force that withdraws her energy and leaves him standing alone at the crossroads of his own ego. When she walked away, she left more than a void. She left a symbolic wound in his psyche, a space where his projections once lived. The woman who once listened to his every word, who softened his insecurities with her presence, who absorbed his moods without complaint, is gone. And now the man is left with his own echo chamber. Silence, for him, becomes louder than any argument could have been. At first he may try to dismiss it. He'll distract himself, run toward validation, chase new attention. But late at night, when distractions fade and the mind quiets, the echoes return. They carry the weight of what was unspoken. They force him to review his behavior, not just in the relationship, but in every area of his life where he has avoided accountability. This is the forbidden space Jung spoke of, the confrontation with the shadow, the side of the self that is selfish, manipulative, or emotionally lazy, the side that expects devotion without deserving it, the side that believes love is owed, not earned. Her silence shatters that illusion. It forces him to realize something most people never admit. We are not haunted by people. We are haunted by our own patterns. Her departure was simply the mirror cracking. Now he must see his reflection without the comfort of her attention softening the edges. This is why so many men obsess over the woman who goes silent. It is not about her silence, it is about their fear of being forced to sit with themselves. Jung called this enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposite. The woman who was once a source of comfort becomes a trigger for growth. The absence of her voice becomes a teacher. The lack of closure becomes an initiation into deeper awareness. But not all men will rise to this challenge. Some will spiral into resentment, believing she is playing a game. They will project their own insecurity onto her silence, calling it manipulation when it is really self-preservation. They will tell themselves she is cruel, when in truth, she is finally choosing herself. Others, those willing to grow, will use the silence as a doorway into their own emotional landscape. They will begin to notice the places where they have demanded energy without reciprocation. They will see how they clung to her attention as a substitute for facing their own loneliness. The process is not romantic. It is not soft. It is ruthless in the way that all true spiritual growth is ruthless. But for the woman who chooses silence over self-betrayal, this is not about punishment. It is about power. Not the power to control, but the power to reclaim, to stop pouring life into connections that do not honor her, to stop explaining her worth to people who refuse to see it. Her silence is her initiation into sovereignty. And for the man left behind, the echoes are relentless. They appear in the quiet moments, in the flashes of memory, in the places where he used to rely on her emotional labor to prop up his self-esteem. He remembers the way she looked at him before she walked away, not with anger, but with clarity. That moment replays in his mind, over and over, not because she wounded him, but because she revealed something he cannot unsee, the truth of his own emptiness. This is the beginning of real change, if he chooses it. Jung believed that nothing transforms a person faster than facing their shadow in the mirror of another human being. But most people run from that mirror. They fill the void with noise, with busyness, with shallow connections. The woman who chooses silence forces him to stop running. And in that stillness, something extraordinary can happen. He can finally begin to understand that love is not about possession. It is not about controlling another person's time, energy, or attention. It is about meeting them in freedom, or not at all. For the woman who knows this truth, silence is not just absence. It is alchemy. She turns detachment into power. She turns endings into beginnings. She turns pain into profound self-respect. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.